News.
Hello to everyone and welcome. This is our first program for the year 2026. It is Global Insight, of course, brought to you by Global's ladies and gentlemen. And today we are taking on a topic that is timely, and that, of course, is the battle of the mind. We are going to quote this: "Man is born free, yet everywhere in chain." Jean-Jacques Rousseau underlined in his 1762 work, The Social Contract. Today, we can call it the battle of the mind as the world evolves. The battle rages not on the battlefields, but in the human mind. As per a report, this is a struggle to control what people see, what they believe, feel, and it has a direct impact in our lives and also on international relations, especially on areas including geopolitics, religion, culture, security, economics, foreign policy, diplomacy, and what have you. Therefore, in a more complex world, perception is powerful and it helps in shaping public discourse. Contemporary realities have presented, however, a hybrid warfare that settles around narratives, memes, and hashtags, among others. Hybrid warfare therefore combines military pressure with information operations, disinformation, cultural framing, and psychological influence to shape outcomes without firing a shot or just having a few of such instances of a physical or military confrontation. The tactic, according to report, is employed by nations to control narratives, shape perceptions, build doubts, divide society, and undoubtedly frustrates the process of decision making. Therefore, during this panel, during this edition of Global Insight, our panel or team of experts will decode the intricacies of this phenomenon, looking at the role, what it is, and the role it plays in a multipolar society, and how nations or both states and non-state actors can navigate and mitigate the adverse effects of such a battle of the mind, which we can also term as a hybrid warfare. That is very obvious in today's tumultuous society. I will join you right after the jingle for us to continue into the deeper analysis of this subject. Welcome back. How can we actually identify warfare? And of course, what is a battle of the mind and of what importance it is in the sphere of geopolitics, diplomacy, foreign policy, and in today's multipolar society, like we have already underlined in the preamble, our panel of experts will help us to decode what all this is all about and why it is imperative to look at the ways and how it is affecting modern day society. And without much ado, we are going to welcome Yulia Berger, political scientist, founder, Global's International Experts Club. It's a pleasure to have you on this first edition of the program for the year 2026, dear Yulia.
Hello, very happy to join today on the first days of 2026. And I think it's a good start for the discussions and opinion exchanges of 2026.
Important, of course, a good start for us to understand that the saying that man is born free but everywhere in chain is still very relevant in today's society, given that the changes or the evolvement happening in the world is actually mixing some resistance and keeping the human mind constant confusion and war. And let's go to Moscow to meet Arnold Dudley, political scientist, and of course, international lawyer. A pleasure having you this day.
Yes, hello, Clarice. Yes, as you said at the preamble, the capturing of the mind and the imagination of masses is part and parcel of hybrid warfare. Be sure propaganda, if you want to call it what it is, first and foremost, predates, the age of digital vectors, but it has accelerated and taken center stage pretty much for the last, let's say, 25 years. And as we can attest today with the events ongoing in Venezuela, we will have ample opportunities to trace back the perception management which led to today's operation.
Absolutely. And of course, we're going to come back subsequently to look at how controlling narratives can actually shape a whole lot as far as public discourse is concerned. Let's go to the United Kingdom to welcome Dr. Antigba Kweni, Geopolitics and Strategic Studies expert. A pleasure having you this day.
Thank you, Clarice, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. And just to note that Dr. Eddie Eric, Global Analyst, Executive Secretary of the Committee of Action for Côte d'Ivoire, will be joining us subsequently from the United States of America. Without much ado, I would love to come back to you, dear Yulia, for us to have okay, I just noticed that Dr. Eddie is there. It's a pleasure to welcome you on this edition of the program, Dr. Eddie.
Thank you, Clarice. If everybody can hear me very well, this is the second show I'm participating in. There is no better way to start the year than being with you and these wonderful individuals in here. To all of you, Happy New Year to 2026. With what we are hearing all over the world, and especially in Venezuela, the first wishes would be for peace, stability, the respect of international law, international order, so that, what the people on the world, can continue to live in their respective countries as citizens of the world, citizens of their countries in peace, for those who work to work and feed their families, and then for us to enjoy. To you, Clarice, and all your technical staff at this Pan-African Media, Happy New Year, and we wish you health and wisdom to continue on this journey with this media.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eddie. Of course, we need that to be strong and firm to continue with this project of widening horizon, educating the world through news giving, for us to understand why the world is taking this dimension or direction it is taking at this particular moment, putting trust and solidarity to be very questionable principles. Coming back to you, Yulia, it is imperative that we have a clear definition of what this battle of the mind is, or hybrid warfare. Taking the latest example, we saw the move by the U.S. President Donald Trump in Venezuela, and I think we can use this as a case study to understand or explain to millions of viewers out there what the battle of the mind is and how it controls public discourse and the effects of it all.
Yes, it's a striking example of the topic that we're planning to discuss today, I believe, and it clearly shows the events in Venezuela that the battle for the mines was already won by the United States and its dominance in media space, information space, because the situation that happened basically a sovereign state was violated, and the head of the state, if he was liked or not, he was captured together with his wife, according to the media statements that are made by the representatives of the United States. And moreover, what they call the Western community supports this happening, and the majority of the public must be convinced that it's a rightful move from the side of the United States to just go and violate everything that is considered to be parts of national sovereignty, bomb the country and capture the head of the state together with his spouse, which surely would have been perceived in a completely different way if the key actor was not the United States but any other country. So it shows that the preparation for this, especially in the media space, information space, that allows the thought that such happenings are in accordance with international regulations. It shows that this battle was clearly dominated by the propaganda machine that has been unrolled decades ago and has been already allowing for assassination of Muammar Gaddafi, for the illegal happenings that are taking place in Iran, Iraq, and many other countries. And I would like to remind you that on January 3, on the very same date, just a couple of years ago, another attack was launched by the very same President Trump against Iran and Iranian actors. So it's not the first time it's happening, and if I'm not mistaken, it's the ninth military conflict that Trump is either launching or actively supporting.
And that's where the problematic lies. We want to understand now at this juncture with you, Dr. Eddie, the tools of this warfare that actually entrapped the human mind and changed public discourse. And we are talking about a chaos that is engulfing the world, even as we are just entering 2026. Some days ago, we are looking at prospects for this day, and starting this phase with such an attack on a sovereign nation, we will want to look at to what extent the tools of this hybrid warfare can go a long way to create grave discrepancies along the interconnected world. Dr. Eddie, the question is directed to you. Unfortunately, Dr. Eddie actually didn't get the question. It's about elaborating on the tools of this hybrid warfare or the battles of the mind, and how it is actually created some sort of discrepancies along the world, which is interconnected at every angle.
A few years ago, the former president of Mali, Alpha Oumar Konaré, said that there will not be a stronger democracy in Mali and, of course, in Africa without a strong media, a strong and independent media. But at the same time, a strong and independent media also needed an environment that, of course, is conducive, an environment in which the civic space, is open, in which, where people have the freedom of expression, and the freedom, of course, what to say, what they want to say. While saying all that, one of the difficulties that was noted was the control, right, of the media. This whole issue of globalization that we have talked about years after years has not necessarily resolved that issue of the control of the media. Who owns the satellites today? Who control the satellites today? Who has the ability today to shut down the internet, shut down the transmission of all this information, regardless of the legion of independent media that, of course, were mushroomed because of the promotion and vocalization of the internet today. When we have said all that, until you have a better share or control of this information space, there will be, of course, this battle warfare, which will be skewed toward who owns. I want to use this military image, which is this that whoever controls what the space control the basis. That's why in the military camps you will see always this garrison or this tower whereby people are posted. We used to see that, in the days past, but nowadays, with drones and all of those things, exist in there. So the next thing I want to say is this: is that the geopolitics, I always say that geopolitics is first of all a question of language. For instance, if at the end of the day I just wake up and get on this stage today and say that, what, my brother Mba, who is on the show with us even here, is wearing a coat that I do not like, and I believe that, what, this coat may have been made from something from the Ivory Coast. I declare him, to be a persona non grata. Out of what? Out of nowhere. It is the media that is going to allow me the power that we have to repeat that. And geopolitically, it becomes something that defines my line of attack. The battle of the mind is again of the battle of the information. The next thing I want to say in this battle of the mind, let's look at all of these social media tools that what we are using, especially in the countries of the South. I continue to wonder why. The internet, for instance, costs a lot of money. With sometimes you have very unproductive things that circulate in there, cost a lot of money in the countries of the South compared to the countries of the North. All of those things for me contributes to what we call the battle of the mind. Who created, TikTok? What kind of TikTok do we have, in our countries? What kind of TikTok do we have? What kind of information or what kind of messages are being shared via TikTok, in the countries of the South, especially in Africa, compared to others? When it comes to the media, how, to what extent, an information space like yours, in here, this Pan-African media, is listened to by people other than the regular folks or Africans outside of the country, when we continue to have other well-structured, well-funded, media like, what, CNN, France 24, what, TV5 Monde, that continue to pump in information. The last line about that is, where is the truth? For many citizens in the countries of the South, especially in Africa, the truth lies always when BBC has said something, that's what the truth is. When France 24 says something, that's what the truth is. When CNN says something, that's where the truth is. And all of those things, for me, again, contribute to what you call, what, the control of the mind, the battle of the mind. And as long as, what, this battle is not in favor of the countries of the South, especially African countries, will continue to lose out on that. So the information space is not as globalized, or it is not as democratized as it should be. But Paris, this is my rendition.
We are here today to bring about clarity on how the little things that do happen will always affect even the decision making process from the political leaders and also non-state actors. And on this note, I come to you, Arnold Davali, from a legal perspective, because if we can take from what has been appointed already by Gilliard and Dr. Eddie, will understand that disinformation, propaganda, fake news, and even soft power dynamics are some of the tools that we see being used in contemporary society to control narratives and, of course, put the human mind at constant war. We take the case study of the Sahel region and even the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. And recently, we bring us down to Nigeria when the decision or the announcement that was made from Donald Trump that there is a Christian genocide happening in Nigeria and they are going to intervene. We saw Nigerians took to their social media pages calling on the government of the U.S. government to actually invade the country. I would love us to take these case studies to try to understand better how these narratives are being controlled primarily by Western media and which wise down to affect the minds of the people, also distorting the social contract that they have with their respective governments.
Yes, well, you are touching on a very large question here. If we approach this question on a purely legal perspective, well, one has to take into account obviously issues bearing on antitrust legislation. Meaning what? Meaning that all the platforms that by and large regulate people's interaction on social networks today are but distributed among a few players. The only platform of note that is not American owned is TikTok. And we saw what happened in the wake of what's been going on in Gaza the last 2 years, when a very large segment of the viewership of TikTok, especially the most targeted one, which is the young generation, the up and coming, the deep generation, were able to inform themselves on TikTok and express themselves, backed up by very powerful algorithm, which privileged the quality of content as opposed to the size of subscribers of any given person, basically created a wide awakening on something that has been carefully hidden and minimized by the perpetrators. And this, sure enough, prompted some influential players in the United States to try to, under the guise of confronting Chinese alleged interest in American privacy, private information. This has led the U.S. government, acting as an instrument, to essentially coerce TikTok to sell their U.S. platform, the U.S. side of their operation at least, to a U.S. controlled operator who would then have the opportunity to insert an algorithm which would basically prevent any kind of thematics to be discussed openly as they had been so far. So what am I getting at here? I'm getting at that unless a nation state, with the wherewithal and the pretension and the ambition to be an actor on the global stage, creates its own internet space. And China has been working on creating their own intranet going back to 1998. It's called the Golden Dome. It's very difficult
to prevent the monopolistic practices of the U.S. Companies to basically get into your societies, the mind of your citizens, to spread some narratives about X, Y, or Z topics in a way that seeks to obtain a manufacturing of consent, at least tacit consent or non-responsive endorsement of certain policies, owing to repetition of tropes bearing on X countries, Z president of those countries, Y certain companies who are somehow not coincidentally deemed and or perceived as being rival competitors of Western companies. So yes, in that sense, any legislation bearing on the concentration of those players, those companies who own the social networks, is a big problem in trying to make sure that the diversity of views gets evenly distributed. But information is power, and he who controls the flow of information controls the flow of such information and how such information is presented to the public. To the extent the European Union, for instance, despite trying to convince the doubter, the would-be doubters of that project, that it aims to become its own entity, does not have its own digital infrastructure. It relies exclusively on US platforms and US companies to such an extent now that even though they've been towing the line on every other files, the lines espoused by Washington for years and years now, when it comes down to trying to impose the what they call the anti-hate legislation, so what essentially are tantamount to curtailing the First Amendment, the U.S. First Amendment, which U.S. companies cannot be found complicit in facilitating. This creates this kind of ubuesque situation where one of the most senior officials of the European Union establishment, former Commissioner Thierry Breton, finds himself denied travel to the United States. So it's interesting because they will complain about extraterritoriality of U.S. law without realizing that they are not sovereign to begin with, and that they owe their own existence to tropes and narratives that have been peddled out of Washington since 1957, since the close of the war. Because the EU project, let's make no mistake about it, is a US sponsored project. It has nothing to do with democratic aspirations of European peoples at that. The second legal pillar of the discussion, I guess, has to be freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, of course, sounds very nice and dandy. It's on pretty much listed on top of every major international instruments and save for a few exceptions, in every existing national constitution. The question is, what can we talk about and under what perspective? And that's when the needy gets greedy, so to speak. The US advocates, even the US, which has the most expansive legislation on free speech, as you saw on certain thematics, you can lose your job, you can be deprived of your student visa, you can even be losing your freshly acquired US passport if need be. We've had a couple of days ago a Israeli billionaire going on CNBC and basically saying in a very stony face that in order to protect the First Amendment, you need to curtail the First Amendment. But the question is, how did he go about saying that without being laughed at? He said it in a way that was implicitly pointing out to those revisionist regimes. In his mind, I guess, Iran, Russia, and China, without, remotely feeling, embarrassed or ashamed or uncomfortable about what we all know is trying to be suppressed by and large the last 2 years. So either you have free flow of information and everybody is allowed to discuss anything, bearing on being ridiculed on the marketplace of ideas by counter arguments with sound support for those arguments, or else it's a illusory promise. First Amendment or anything you want to call it, freedom of speech is but a chimera. So, but yeah, you need basically to have digital sovereignty, and you need to have freedom of speech. Short of that, in order to guarantee freedom of speech, those two work together. And Dr. Eddy alluded to this when he mentioned that Africa doesn't have its own digital infrastructure, and that all of the content that African people get exposed to by and large are promoted by US tech companies. But it's the same in Europe. Except for China, again, the whole world relies on US tech companies, and that's the big problem.
And of course, it brings us to how complex it is. And we know that when the mind is in a state of global contest, the effect is seen somehow it brings about some sort of polarization of societies, and of course, internal divisions as citizens tend not to understand the narratives pertaining their respective nations, but act or think according to what has been presented to them. And this brings us to how this affects globally the geopolitical standing of a nation. With you, Dr. Andy, looking at how the global context of the mind, or the mind being in global context, can affect its the country's geopolitical standing and perception within the nation.
Listen,
Okay.
Yes, go ahead. So.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that what is truly important for today's discourse is to understand the displacement of sovereignty and the introduction of a new battlefield from the oil field, from the battlefield to the human cognition. Introducing a system where the real battlefield goes on in the mind, and who feeds the mind words controls the direction and pattern of thought that follows that thinking faculty. So, bearing this in mind, we begin to see how people respond to information, well, regardless of what platform such information is, and we also see that this reaction has led to concepts such as what do they call fake news? Sometimes we hear reports, and then at the end of the day, it is concluded that that report was actually fake news. So for the most part, you might have to hold on for some layers of verification before you can actually be certain whether that report was fake or not fake, and then that leads to a system where there are multi-level layers of verification, and whether you like it or not, there's a gradual style of erosion of sovereignty that allows you to rely on a person who controls the infrastructure to be the ultimate determinant of truth. And for countries that do not have that infrastructure, for countries that do not have that system, they have to rely on those who have been able to put that structure in place. All right. So that's why the question of erosion of sovereignty is introduced. So, how does geopolitics comes in? When we talk about this, we see how you might want to say that in a traditional class, a traditional style of fending or managing a nation, countries would usually focus on citizens diplomacy, reducing issues, challenges, problem solving in a local style that seeks to identify peculiarities and fashion solutions in that manner. But there is a globalization of practices, globalization of thoughts, a globalization of actions, needs, and opinions. If you are able to convince a people that a regime is bad, then there might be the temptation that even the military might conclude that that regime is ultimately undeserving of its loyalty and commitment. So these are some of the challenges that
Please, your mic is muted.
Your presentation from here. So judging by the kind of realities that the nation is confronted with, it is typically fixated in a situation where, one, it might be holding on for confirmation or verification or authentication from the controllers of the algorithm as it has been set up, from the controllers of the system that has put in place the machine learning platforms, the automation that is running and driving information at different levels. So it is dangerous to allow a people to ultimately feed completely on this kind of setup, because I, for one, believe that situations or challenges should reflect cultural realities. So how a security challenge is handled or sorted in a nation like Nigeria, where there are a lot of religious issues tied to understanding or interpreting security concerns, might slightly be different from how such issues are handled in the UK. So these circumstances surrounding interpretation and cognitive manipulation might further lead to a situation where a government that should know what to do, a people that should know how to resolve their conflicts, are themselves victims of a global awareness that is built on information manipulation and cognitive control. So I'll pause for that for now until I'm able to rectify the issues. I think I'm having a really bad control from here. Thank you.
It's about the information manipulation and how can we mitigate this manipulation with you, Yulia. We are coming to a point of critical thinking, having understood actually what the battle of the mind is and how it actually, puts aspects of international relations at some sort of conflicts, because it brings us to question the place of law and the place of regulations and international defined standards in the way nations react with each other. Let's answer this question before moving forward to understand if actually the process of ensuring or maybe controlling the narratives, can we say that it is largely negative, or where do we see the negativity in it, especially in terms of helping nations form foreign policy and also engage diplomatically with other nations in a multilateral setting that will benefit its population?
Well, what happened today was another nail in the coffin of the international rules and international law once again. Yet at the same time, there is another challenge that the community is facing in terms of disinformation, misinformation, and fake news. And that challenge is related to artificial intelligence. So even in more sophisticated areas such as academic work, the problem that is being faced by many researchers right now is that due to a great amount of text generated by artificial intelligence, it's becoming more and more difficult to find reliable information sources and reliable statistics, reliable information, generally speaking. So it's one of the problems that is faced at universities when students tend to use artificial intelligence instead of doing their own research and working on their papers and so on. Yet at the same time, the very same problem is observed at, let's say, higher levels of academia as well. So if even in this sector and segment, it's becoming difficult to find reliable sources, not hundreds and thousands of AI crafted duplicates that in many cases do contain false information or various kinds of misinterpretations that are either ideologically biased or are just being a result of imperfections of the artificial intelligence itself. What can we say about media, and what can we say about common sense that hardly remains in mainstream media? Unfortunately, there is a great problem due to the fact that content creation right now, including text, including AI-generated videos, in many cases is misleading. Sometimes it's purposefully done so, and in some cases those are just technical issues and technical errors that tend to be duplicating themselves hundreds and thousands of times across the internet. So a big problem of let's say this phase and of the next phase is the fact that the content itself is out of control, and unless human beings are still capable of applying their own cognitive skills and critical thinking and double checking the information that they come across, it will be very difficult. Another problem is that in many cases the population is purposefully made to be quite submissive, accepting the narratives that are flowing to them from the TV. And of course, this is a very beneficial position for many governments that are able to control the population and push their points across without any significant resistance, let's put it that way. So one easy step is manipulating people into submitting to behavior models that are being expected from them by the government. And another thing is let's say making people close their eyes to major crimes that they're seeing, just like what we see happening with Gaza, just like what we see happening, unfortunately, to many other places in the world, when obvious things that can hardly be interpreted as positive things are still being accepted by the silent majority as something that is okay when it clearly is not. So a big challenge and a big responsibility that emanates from all of those facts is the need for people to still use the critical thinking and own moral compass and raise their children the very same way through the concepts of consciousness, through the concepts of human values, and through the concepts of sticking to those immortal values and principles that have been keeping the humanity alive.
Which is very imperative. In the same light, we want to look at how all of these affect public policy standing of nations. With you, Dr. Eddie, we are asking this question with a case study. When we look at the Sahel states, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, we see that there is some sort of conflict, as those saying that with the military in regime, it already violates what is defined as democracy, and people calling for return to civilian rule. But the realities on the ground will always present the necessity of what is happening. Let's use this as a case study and see how this form of manipulation that comes with using terms like democracy or maybe authoritarian role puts both the nation's leaders and the population in a state of I don't know if we should call it a quagmire, without having a well settled conclusion as to how to navigate the realities of the nation, given that a lot of public discourses still surround around the fact that the military regime is not what is supposed to be in place, but then the geopolitical realities of the country is given some sort of an exemplary clarification as to why the nations are taking that particular trajectory at this moment, and what is the way forward out of such a situation.
It is clear from what we read that particularly when it comes to Africa, with the examples that when you took, that the intervention of the military in the political sphere is automatically condemned. This is a baseline that the African international institutions, the global international institutions, the Western powers, will continue to feed on. And there is a historical background to that. We all know that the 1960s, years of independence for many African countries, were also replete with coup d'etats, eruption of military powers into the political arena. Of course, as a result of that, there has been this portrayal, right, of military regimes are automatically being bad. The reality may be something else. There are so many examples in the space that where you identified West Africa, for instance, where cases in which military rulers became actually the military rulers became the harbinger, right, of democratic progress, or I will say of a improvement of political systems to the like of the populations. We have examples with the former and the late Jerry Rawlings. But even in Nigeria, we have example with Abu Salami Abubakar, for instance, when he took over at when Sani Abacha, left the power. It took only 9 months for Abu Salami Abubakar to organize some election. And today, this is also being quoted in there. What does that mean? It simply means that, yes, there is a language out there. The question, Clarice, is, how do we make sure that, terms such as, authoritarian regimes, junta, strongmen, and all of those things in there are, if you want, were pushed back. I want to side with Julia, who said it earlier, in terms of how people can use the critical, thinking, how people can actually also use the ability to read, the ability to process. To receive today to actually make a decision on their own, and either side with whether the regimes that they have in power are authoritarian regimes or not. One of the things that what people need to know and understand is that the question of authoritarian regimes does not lay only with military regimes or with head of states that have that spring from the military. We have today the Freedom House, for instance, to quote that institution that rank countries in the world in terms of whether they're free, partly free, or not free at all. It is said that, in Africa, for instance, you have a majority. You take West Africa, out of the 16 countries that are part of the ECOWAS, I don't know how many of them that are considered to be free countries. But not all of these 16 countries in West Africa are under military rules. People need to understand that. People need to know that. And how do we make sure that, again, people understand that, the language can be also fabricated because, again, geopolitics, politics at the global level is also about the language that we use. Once we determine that, a country has a corrupt government, that language calls for certain policies. And Clarisse, you're talking about public policy. I'm going to talk about global policy in here. That's what it is. Once you determine that, a country or a neighboring country is producing or is hosting some quote unquote terrorist organization, and then you label that country as such, I'm just taking an example, it determines the kind of actions, measures, or relationship that, you're going to entertain with such a country. When it comes to the populations, again, we got to admit that nowadays, with the power of the internet, right? The scientists, are right. Those who reflected on that, in years past to say that, once technology reaches a certain level, maybe humanity will be losing. And this is what we are witnessing. We are clearly witnessing that today. Every single day, even some of us who are researchers can be very easily distracted by social media and by all that information that we receive. It may not be social media, but it may also be some information that are engineered from what maybe 1% of truth, and the rest is nothing but pure fabrication to distract the people. Where does it come from? Citizens are responsible for that. Criminals are responsible for that. But even governments are also themselves responsible for sometimes engineering some disinformation. For instance, Clarisse, when during the time of an election, you have government officials that propagate certain, information, knowing that, it is baseless, it is not true. For instance, the number of people of voters turn out, etc., beefing up the numbers so that, we can justify the re-election of a dictator, of an authoritarian leader, whether that authoritarian leader is a military person or not. All of those things, will also come into play in terms of spoiling, in terms of corrupting the minds of people. And when you have, in some countries, the level of literacy, and here when I'm saying level of literacy, I'm not talking about the inability of people to reflect, but their inability, their digital skills being so low sometimes, it becomes a problem for people to distinguish between misinformation, disinformation, and accurate information. You understand? And once again, it is because we are very bombarded. We have heard of things. This morning, when I heard about, what the capture of the president of Venezuela, the first thing that I did for what I know is to go to credible sources. Sometimes those credible sources are themselves also, right, pure manipulator or producers of false information. But nonetheless, you got to go to CNN. You got to go to France 24. You got to go to Al Jazeera. You got to go even to the independent sources from Venezuela itself. You got to go to some African sources. In about 10 minutes, you are able to do that when you have this capacity to know that today the internet is a revolutionary power. The internet can also be very dangerous for individuals, for citizens. So I'm going to land on that question in here, Clarice. When again you talk about the public policy, I want to insist on that. Disinformation has become, misinformation has become, fake news. All those things have become so dangerous sometimes for the stability, for human security, that we have seen so many countries, even at the global level, measures being taken to curb this thing and to combat that. But at the same time, the tools that are invented, engineered to combat, disinformation or misinformation or fake news or all of those things that inform and can inform public policy, at the same time that you are combating that, others are also rearing their tail. We are living in a very difficult, right, moment. It is very easy today for a head of state to make a public announcement and say, this morning we have captured quite a number of individuals because they were doing X, Y, and Z to subvert, the sovereignty or the stability of the nation. The time that it will take for you, Clarice, with your meager media, to go find the truth and reestablish that truth, you will see that fake news has propagated itself all the way. It is not new. And I'm ending on that. It is not new. It is simple fact. It is simply that the internet has made those things to accelerate it to go at a faster rate. In the Ivory Coast, for instance, I remember in 1993, there was a news that was propagated that led to some pogroms against the Ghanaian community. It was out of a soccer game. When one of the favorites and the famous teams in Cote d'Ivoire went to Ghana to play, on their way back, they did claim that they were attacked, they were beaten, the supporters and all that. It took, my brothers and sisters and the people listening to me, less than an hour for the entire country, from Abidjan to the north of the country, to be inflamed, and everybody went against, the Ghanaian, nationals living in Cote d'Ivoire. Before the Minister of Interior can intervene to ask people to calm down, damage has already been done. Was it true? Was it verified? Was it assessed? Was it properly, verified that truly people were attacked? And even if it was the case, was it the proper way to react? Today, what the internet has done again was to make this kind of news go faster than ever. So it informs public policy for sure. This is the reason why I continue to support even any independent media sources that will help kind of level the playground. This is a very difficult task, level the playground still, so that people can get the information that they need to get, be well informed, because there is no strong citizen, no stable society without citizens being properly and adequately informed about what is going on in their country.
That is saying in a selective perception and exposure to the various aspects of a society. And like you've noted, our reason for being here is to understand all of these intricacies and see how moving forward we can actually mitigate the negative effect or the spillover effect of such manners or disinformation processes which actually becomes very problematic for the future of nations, and why not individuals, particularly the young minds. And we even ask questions if there is an independent media, like you just highlighted with you, Arnold Doubly. When we want to look at the wind of change blowing across the African continent and how narratives are being shaped, some pundits have actually advocated the fact that the fact that we started having clear voices from the African media, the African journalists started redefining and reinterpreting, global events. It has given a voice, and that is why today we are looking at a revolutionary continent. And France, Africa, the relation between France and Africa is a clear example of how perception or the narratives regarding this relationship, particularly between these two entities, have gone a long way to shape narratives. But now all of these have still been entrapped by the roles based orders. Now with the chaotic nature of the world and with the confusion of probably defining what authoritarian role is or dictatorship is, as nations will always bring forth the statement that there is need to protect the sovereignty and the interest of the state. We see that we are again entrapped in that hotspot with with more need for clarity on how to navigate this very complex phase, especially in line with international relations and or core relations between states.
Well, I mean, as I was saying in my prior intervention, unless you have digital sovereignty and you can protect your own constituents from outside narrative and discourses, you're going to have to form the people to not take at face value the first thing, as Dr. Adi was saying, that's peddled on the internet. Because the problem is certain informations are peddled in such a way so as to cater to certain emotional preconception on such and such issues. All those things are very carefully conceived and designed in such a way so as to elicit certain reaction. Some privately funded, I should say extremely well funded at that, foundations and or institutes have been working on this for decades in the West prior to the advent of digital platforms and the miniaturization of the flow of information in one's hand. Take entities like the Bertelsmann Foundation of the Tavistock Institute. Dr. Adi mentioned the Freedom House. There's the Chatham House, and a whole slew of those organizations. They've been working for decades, going back to the 1920s at the very least, when Sigmund Freud, little nephew, Edward Bernay, who's credited to be the inventor of modern advertising, wrote in his seminal book Propaganda how to basically engineer desire in the mind of a targeted segment of the population in order for them to act objectively against their own interest, but so as to guarantee a supply of consumers for the client, the order giver. So those things have been going on for a long, long time. And what we're seeing today, in a way, is compounded by the fact that there's so much flow of information. And the police, the band The Police, used to have a song called Too Much Information back in the early 80s. So they understood somehow how this could be counterproductive. And if you're not able to think properly, to think rationally, to have a frame of reference on any given subject that allows you to take with a grain of salt any given type of information that's being thrown at you, you're running the risk of, inflaming public sentiment. And as Dr. Adi also said, by the time you get to rectify the veracity of what was peddled, enough time has passed by that you may have, who knows, hundreds of casualties if we are talking about very inflammatory issues. So, it is what it is. But, again, it's almost like going against the grain. If you add to this the fact that with the multiplicity of screens from the youngest age, and I'm sorry, I'm sorry to say that in the realm of parenting, a lot of parents nowadays, in order to be left alone to carry on their own activities, tend to give put into the hands of their infant digital instruments. And we know that the effect on the development synapses of not completely formed nervous system and or brain synapses circuitry can lead to, over time, a short attention span. And if you cannot concentrate more than the goldfish in his aquarium, which is on average 9 seconds per sequence, how are you expecting people to develop sense of reflection and ponderation and thoughtfulness on any given issue. So you see, it's a catch-22. It's a Ouroboros situation here. But we have no choice. We have to confront it and deal with it because there's no going back. Technology marches on, unfortunately, in that sense that the genie is out of the bottle. I will close my intervention today because I have to run with an article that was published in the New York Times back in December 2004 by someone called Aaron Susskind. And he was quoting a then Bush administration senior official who was saying that basically, notwithstanding the arguments put forward to justify the illegal invasion of Iraq, and I quote, while you people are trying to figure out what might have been done, how we did it, and who should be allegedly held accountable, we are already, as we speak, moving on to the next stage. So that by the time you come to somewhat of a consensus as to what should be done or how should the issue be framed, you would have completely reframed and shifted the reality within which you are attempting to understand what just took place. He said basically we're an empire. There's not a place on this earth that we do not know what goes on. If a sparrow falls on the ground on the other side of the planet, we know about it instantly. So that somewhat, 20 years later, this always echoes in my mind because that pretty much summarizes the power of, the countries who control 80 to 90% of the digital platforms. They can fashion, manufacture, frame people's perception of events. I'm not even going to get into AI, which now creates a whole new layer of challenge because above and beyond the perspective on the issue, whatever that issue might be, now you're dealing with the cognitive integration of what it is you're seeing. Is it real? Is it not? We know that AI cannot resolve complex issues. We're not at that stage yet, and it's somewhat very worrying to what extent AI may become one day self-aware. But for the time being, it does enough damages that it can, and again, feeding into what Dr. Eddy was saying, send a perception which on an impressionable mind can create havoc and multiply by millions of impressions. I can only, allude to the social disturbances that this may lead to.
And just to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that if you're just tuning in, you're on to your Pan-African media and on the program Global Inside. We are looking at insights. We are looking at the battle of the mind, where the human mind is gradually overwhelmed by the global context, given the disturbances across the global world, especially along lines of diplomacy, helping to frustrate nations in decision making, but actually is also bringing some sort of revolutionary thinking, which are very positive and towards redirecting the trajectory of nations, particularly emerging countries of the global south. And a panel of experts is continuing to give us analysis and how we can navigate the complexities of looking at the pros and the cons of such a situation and the tools that we can use in contemporary society to actually, reduce the adverse or the negative effect of such a phenomenon on the human mind. And we continue with you, Dr. Andy. We're taking a case study with from Nigeria. Just to note that such a topic will warrant many case studies to understand better why it is imperative. According to some, information, I wouldn't say official, largely unverified, the case in Nigeria. it was said that somebody who spoke on condition of anonymity, that it has been noticed that terrorists are not killed in Nigeria. And then we also want to take a look at the position of the Chibok girls, or the Chibok saga, and how it actually probably affected the perception and even the political direction of the country in over the last 2 years. And with probably your understanding of the internal dynamics of the country like Nigeria, let's see how this some sort of political rhetorics have actually helped to frustrate more Nigerians, making them arrive conclusions that sometimes become very problematic as to what to expect of the government with such declarations of the fact that terrorists are instead put into the government to protect the interest of the sitting president. Hello, Dr. Andy. Please, your mic is muted. We cannot hear you. Please.
Okay, please, can you recast? I have been struggling to hear you since today.
I was looking at a case study with actually news that is unverified, coming from somebody who spoke on condition of anonymity about the situation in Nigeria. Nigeria has been battling Boko Haram, and also we also know about the abduction that has been happening, the case of the Chibok girls. This source actually identified that it has been noticed that terrorists are not actually killed in Nigeria, but actually integrated into the Nigerian military to protect the interests of the state. And this has caused some sort of chaos in the minds of Nigerians who actually do not assimilate the situations. Do you think there is any veracity in this, and how has this actually affected the maybe public perception of Nigeria and their trust in the government of President Tinubu?
Well, okay.
You're muted. The mic is muted, please. Okay, good.
A number of explanations have been advanced as to why that has happened. If at all it happened, I think it is a collateral damage, and do not see any reason why that should have happened in the first place. But we see people claiming that terrorists are citizens. We see people claiming that terrorists are part and parcel of our society. Therefore, instead of dealing with them as terrorists, we should deal with them as citizens. Instead of attending to victims of terrorism, we should offer subventions or soft landing for such practices of terrorism. Instead of using taxpayers' monies to develop society, we pay that as ransom to terrorists who are bent on frustrating efforts of development and advancement of national agenda. So what initially was making the rounds as rumors was confirmed when we saw in the media that some of these young men were put through a sort of a kind of amnesty project or amnesty program, where at the end of it were reintegrated into the military forces. And not long after that, we started hearing reports coming up from all quarters how the military has been compromised, how they were gunning down armed security personnel, how they were getting intelligence reports that security forces are heading in direction A or B. So before before such operations are effectively executed, it has been frustrated by terrorists who are getting information of such operations. So these are some of the challenges that have popped out from the efforts that the Nigerian government has made in dealing with terrorism. It is not one that the blame is entirely on the government. It is one that we can begin to say that there are people even within the system that have become too powerful to be confronted. They are too powerful to be named. They are too powerful to be pointed at and prosecuted. So a good example of these persons are there. If you check your reports coming from Nigeria, you see that some of these names have been asked to be prosecuted, but no real effort has been put up in that direction. So what options do you leave us with? Does it make sense that you have cases where people, officers and men of the Nigerian forces, some of them do not are sneaking out. Some of them are going into extinction, completely down tooling. Their morale is poor. Their confidence is eroded. So if we have situations like this where officers who are trained to provide security, to secure the borders of the land, are themselves weakened by the numerous atrocities that the state, by reason of such practices, is meting out on citizens, I do not think that there is any hope anywhere. So it is an embarrassing situation. It is one that nobody should be proud of. And I think that the time has come where we put national security over and above mere politics, because politics is going to come and go. But at the end of the day, when you destroy the nation, when you destroy critical infrastructure that has been put up by taxpayers' monies, you are definitely going to have a people without a nation.
Absolutely, having a people without a nation, which is a very problematic. The people need the nation to keep the identity, and narratives control will always lead to an extinction of a particular belief or a society or a people, and that is what we are trying to control in today's edition of the program, as we also look at the interconnectedness of the world coming back. We now see how this the inequality in narratives is affecting global diplomacy. With you, dear Yulia, how can we explain this? Noting that from all that has been said, we see that there is already that imbalance of diplomacy as far as narratives control is. And what is the way forward still?
Well, diplomacy has also become, unfortunately, something quite vague, especially when we're talking about official diplomacy, and with each conflict that emerges on the global arena, we see that diplomatic instruments, unfortunately, again, have become not really effective. Mm-hmm. The UN, for example, that was supposed to be playing the role of a mediator and one resolving conflicts before they reach an escalated military phase, can only express their concerns about conflicts that are taking place globally. And even today, it was quite obvious that that it's hard to find someone, especially among the strong actors, who would really care about the UN resolutions and about the UN procedures. So unfortunately, diplomacy and official diplomacy has discredited itself quite a lot due to its actual weakness. So I think the strength is within the people-to-people diplomacy, and this is something that is somewhat capable of dragging us out of the craziness and chaos that the world seems to be moving to at accelerated pace. So networks of communities, expert communities, and this kind of horizontal connections between the people that are still holding the system through is something more reliable, unfortunately, than some of the traditional institutions that are not really playing their role anymore. So this is one of the ways forward, and another, I would say, is just the realistic approach in terms of geopolitics and interest-based approach in terms of international relations that would imply a better understanding of how the system can function.
Can it is also imperative that we stay still with diplomacy and taking the case of the African continental bloc of number one institutional bloc. We still come back to the African Union, because controlling narratives in your region or probably in your area means that sometimes there is need for drastic decision making that will serve the interest of the population and trust it in your care. With you, Dr. Eddie, let's look at maybe going back to 2025 for some of the diplomatic breakthroughs, especially as far as the African Union is concerned. We look at its position in the probably the G20. We actually saw South Africa hosting a successful actual summit. And we can also talk about the continent's integration into BRICS plus. And can we say that this actually demonstrates some sort of a successful resistance against maybe global perception chains that have always relegated the African countries to the last position? And how imperative is this in shaping Africa towards attaining its developmental agenda 2063?
Clarence, very definitely. The hosting of the G20 in South Africa amidst controversies with the United States, number one. Number two, the full integration embrace of the BRICS by quite a number of African countries. Some of them, like Nigeria, that have been admitted, as observing members, upping their status, within the BRICS. And looking also at the ways in which many other African countries are actually also increasing their relationship with the BRICS countries. Looking and taking into consideration what South Africa put up when it comes to the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. Actually, we know that what the South African government went even further to file or lodge a complaint at the International Criminal Court. We have seen, and another example I want to take very quickly in 2025, it's how the South African government traveled to the United States and met President Cyril Ramaphosa, came with a delegation to meet with the president of the United States over the issue regarding, with the white farmers in South Africa. It was a matter of pushing back against a certain rhetoric that was taking shape or has taken shape in the United States regarding the ways in which where white farmers were being treated in South Africa. The South African government, efforts to push back against this rhetoric, not only in a face-to-face meeting, but also using its social media or any other venue like the African Union and any other global space to give their position can definitely be seen as a template, right, of how they conscientious, African countries can continue to push back against this type of rhetoric that does not actually serve the cause of the people. I believe that, it is imperative. It is a clear template. But that imperative, requires the guts, of a government like the one in Southern Africa, but not the complicit, right, government, type of government that, we have in many African countries. You will not expect a government such as the one in Cote d'Ivoire. You will not expect a government such as the one in Cameroon and in many other places, to really, like, even in Gabon or even in Guinea today, to really put up, some sort of rhetoric against whatever is being pumped in by Western media. You mentioned, 2025, but I just want to go back a little bit to talk about, what the period of COVID-19, for instance. During that time, also, we saw how Western media or the information coming from them, of course, reflecting the interest of their country, where this information was simply rehashed or certainly for the sake of benefiting also from what we have called, what the COVID packages. We saw that, very few African leaders, and I wanted to remember the late Magufuli of Tanzania, who really came up, may it be controversial or not, with some sort of anti-rhetoric or rhetoric opposing what was coming from the Western media regarding the origination of this COVID-19 and the measures that were taken. We saw that, Africa's, reaction to COVID-19 was 100% predicated, on what, of course, what the European partners, will be saying. This is a form of language that reminds us of what also happened during the time of Ebola, for instance, in West Africa, and sometimes somewhere also in Congo. It doesn't mean that what the origin of Ebola was misconstrued, or that what the existence or the prevalence of that disease was misconstrued. That's not the point. The point is that the rhetoric that surrounded that determined again the ways in which the World Health Organization, international partner, global partners, and the Western countries, intervene in resolving this situation in Africa. So for me, Clarisse, I do agree with you that it is what South Africa did in 2025, and the ways in which many African countries today are to a certain extent reinventing their position in this global arena. And we take the example of the countries of the Sahel, for instance. At the beginning of this venture, of course, what they were lambasted, they were flogged, they were laughed at. But today we see that, there is something in there. And this something in there has also created opportunity for countries that rejected them, at first, to start threats of terrorism in this area, but also to reinvent some tools of cooperation, moving forward. So what South Africa did is, again, a clear template. It is imperative. But the biggest imperative for me in this battle of the information is, again, what I will call a serious, school of thought, when it comes to this kind of thing. What does that mean, very quickly, Clarisse? What I mean by that is, if we understand that, what communication is key, if we understand that, what information is key, information support, what the political system that, what we want. Information support, what stability. Information support, what political, what stability, economic stability, and anything. Information, if today, for instance, in a country, it is announced that, what you have a food poisoning, that, what the food that has been imported from whatever country is all, spoiled or poisoned and people should not consume that, you will automatically see the kind of a panic people will have. If we talk about the water contamination, like, a few days ago, we talk about, about some oils can frighten a population. When you do not have a counter discourse, accurate one, so with accurate information, it can be very detrimental. And of course, it can inform the type of policy that, what people will take, the type of measures that they will take. So it is imperative. I do agree with you that South Africa has put in there a template that many African countries, including the African Union, should follow. Unfortunately, when it comes to the African Union, we take the situation in the Congo, for instance, for a long period of time. The president of DRC cried foul, blaming Rwanda for backing up, the M23. Whether it was considered, it was taken seriously or not, we have seen a very weak reaction from the African Union. Matter of fact, this conflict did not move that far until, right, you have this attempt by the White House, the United States, executive power to resolve this conflict, and then we saw the signature of this peace agreement, which is actually not holding that much. But as soon as it was done, with the rhetoric around that, it was repeated by the African Union. These kind of things are things that needs to actually stop, but it will stop only and only when the African Union and any other African institutions are able to also control the information system and to put out there some credible information that will be strongly backed so that it becomes also a counter discourse that is taken into consideration.
Indeed, there is need for the African media platform to champion the African agenda, and I think also a need for media actors to rethink journalism in the 21st century to actually help solve this problem of the hybrid warfare that is largely affecting the vibrant population in Africa and of course elsewhere. In another probably dimension, we want to look at the place of elections with you, dear Yulia. We've actually mentioned how the Western or mainstream media controls probably narratives, shape perceptions, and then we will also highlight the place of the opposition. If you look at it keenly, opposition will always probably keep secrets the successes of a ruling party, but bring to the fore just one side of the story, the lapses. And of course, we want to answer first of all this question: if actually there is such a government without challenges, and we see how especially this is very quite noticeable in countries trying to organize elections, where we see mainstream media championing narratives alongside the opposition, and even very common today, we see influencers without understanding the political narratives of a country championing some sort of media discourse that go to a long way. It goes to a long way to bring maybe tend a negative image about the country and the ruling party, and how this actually affects overall conduct of elections. And now still a situation in line with such. When we take the example of the attack on Venezuela, we note that the President Trump highlighted that he's actually fighting against drugs, and the airstrikes always leads to human lives being lost. But then such a situation in another country, sovereign country, when there is that drastic move to tame terrorists who are actually posing a security threat to a nation, it attracts some sort of global condemnation, bringing all actors at a point of uncertainty. So how can we relate all of these aspects and maybe define a real scope that will help us understand better, see how we can even shape the perceptions of our nations, and look more of the benefits at hand rather than the unverified narratives with some sort of hidden agenda?
Well, let me start by talking about the opposition and the constructive and destructive aspects of the opposition. So on the constructive note, opposition is the one pointing out negative effects of policies, pointing out various flaws of policies, and providing some kind of a balance of political forces due to the fact of its existence per se, which means that the opposition somehow limits the activities of the ruling party or the ruling political leader whatsoever. And the global arena, it also does create a similar system of checks and balances when one power is balanced by another, which could be opposing it in terms of its approaches and in terms of its policies. Similar to the facade democratic model demonstrated in the United States. And the reason why I say facade is because the elite is quite closed and interconnected, and the number of the political parties in the United States limits to 2 political forces, not to mention rules and regulations that are applied for the electoral process itself. So it's hard to call it, let's say, a classical democracy, yet at the same time, that's what it is according to the widely promoted definition. So going back to the opposition, the constructive role of it could be what I just listed, yet at the same time, that deals with opposition and, let's say, supports oppositional content and point of views is always mean what I mean by that is the fact that for most of the
I think we lost Yulia. Just to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that this is a platform for expert analysis, in-depth analysis into very pertinent issues that are affecting the global world. And today we are focusing
in the current system of relations at the arena. We also see quite a lot of interesting deformation. So I'm right now observing Trump's statements at the press conference that he's holding in the U.S. and the rhetorics that are being used to justify the activities that have just taken place in the sovereign state of Venezuela, where the head of state was captured together with his spouse. And there are new threats coming in from the side of the United States when Trump says that they're ready to go for even a bigger attack on Venezuela if it's trying to resist somehow. So it's interesting to observe how this kind of logic and how flexible the logic and its twists could be depending on the goals being followed. Because once again, if any other country was to be making such statements and throwing direct threats around the globe, we would probably see a different reaction. So whatever is, some political leaders are being accused of and labeled dictators is considered as a perfect example of democracy if that's coming from the United States, which is clearly showing hypocrisy of the global politics. Yet at the same time, to mention the constructive ways out of these disbalances, I assume that could be only a similar response, which would imply demonstrating and acting strong in defending own interests, which, for example, Russia has been doing for a while by now, and which China is capable of doing in the discourse of Taiwan and some other issues, just due to the simple fact that the global trade depends on China to a great extent. But we will see how those cases would develop, and it definitely is very interesting to observe. But unfortunately, the transformations at the global arena are implying major clashes, let's say shakeups, and quite a lot of victims. So that's the price that is being paid for the current transformation process.
And of course, we're talking about the transformation process, transformation that will benefit, of course, the people, especially at the grassroots level. We are almost culminating, but we'll continue to look at recommendations henceforth on how to navigate this complex phase, especially as the African continent and other nations of the global south are gaining momentum in the sphere of global economy, and also in areas of diplomacy and decision making affecting the global arena. With you, Dr. Eddie.
Clarence, I'm sorry, but we lost you at some point. If you want to recast the question again for me, please.
Actually, just noticed that we're almost culminating with the show, but then it is always imperative to have some sort of like a summary as to how to navigate this complex phase. From the analysis given, we see that this battle of the mind, or the cognitive dissonance or warfare that the world is facing now, is actually one that it's leading to more disaster if the information is not checked, and of course if media actors do not really control and cross-check the media sphere to reduce the negative effect of manipulation or fake news, or even propaganda in the minds of the people that will in turn affect every decision making in that country, and the level of confidence, and also how nations or nationals will respond to their respective governments in terms of decision making pertaining their future and interest.
Thank you, Clarice. The first thing, as we ended the show today, that I believe we want to recap on will be that misinformation, disinformation, fabricated news, any sort of fraud that corrupt, people's minds, give them a wrong perception of things that exist, and of course, will skew their decision making, whether they're in government, whether they are citizens, whether they are migrants, in whatever category that where people may find themselves in, whether they're women, the young people, etc., is something that is not new. For ages, in all that what we study, we understand that government, we understand that individuals can manipulate what information in any type of society, group, organizations, where they are. It can be at the local level, it can be at the federal level, it can be at a bigger national level. The add-on in here is that the revolution in what we call the IT, information and technology, or the revolution in the technology of the communication with what we know as the internet, as just amplified those things. The internet became, or is today, a wonderful tool that has changed the ways in which we live, the ways in which we move from one place to another, the ways in which we receive information, the ways in which we feed ourselves, the ways in which we relate to one another, the ways in which we even receive medical attention with telemedicine, the ways in which where we receive our education. Yesterday we were talking about remote education. Today it is about tele education. It is all those things have changed, but at the same time, in improving the ways in which we live, the ways in which we worship, we do everything. We don't necessarily go to church or to the mosque or follow our religions, by being physically present. We can do all that, online. Those things have changed, but they have also come. The internet has also come with a level of danger. And that danger is the amplification of anything that can be fraudulent, anything that can be misinformation, anything that can be disinformation, anything that can be pure fabrication of a fact for the sake of achieving certain goals. If people are not aware of that, if people do not develop their digital capacity, their literacy to understand and distinguish between what can be fake news, what can be misinformation, and what can be disinformation, we are going to face the emergence of misinformed citizens of the world, misinformed citizens in countries, and misinformed, disinformed individuals become very dangerous for their respective countries. For the sake of for countries such as the African countries, that of course, are vying. This it becomes, key because our democratic systems are failing. Our political systems are failing us. A minute ago, our dear co-panelists, were earlier talk about the role that opposition political leaders, can play, and the ways in which they can also use the information. But let us not forget that they themselves can also be the culprit in this. The propagation of misinformation and disinformation. So all of those things that are in there, I believe that there is a serious work that African governments, civil society organizations need to do in terms of educating the masses when it comes to this battle of the mind and this warfare. In the 1980s, there was a minister of youth and civil service in Cote d'Ivoire. He is late now, who said that during the International Day of Youth, right? International Day of Peace, saying that, if it is in the mind of people that ideas of fighting, ideas of war starts, then it is in the mind of people that we need to implant ideas of peace, ideas of cooperation, and ideas of solidarity. The ways to do that, again, we cannot continue to have educational system in Africa today, in this age of the internet, where children can finish elementary school, high school, and even sometimes college without the big fully cognizance of what we call the information and technologies today. It is true, according to the International Telecommunication Union, that Africa is one of the places where the internet is penetrating at the fastest rate. However, digital access remains very expensive. And all of those things play actually into what kind of information people receive and the role also that our governments are playing into allowing. Not long ago, we heard, for instance, in the United States, that this issue about TikTok, how the US, were planning to ban it because of the content in there. What is the role that, our content creators are, were playing today in the stability or in the protection of human security in Africa? This is a key. People are being scammed. People are being fed, with misinformation. People are being fed misinformation about, availability of jobs. For instance, in the Middle Eastern countries, they've been recruited for some jobs that do not exist. Not long ago, I read about, how many people were scammed of the little money that they have in Cameroon because somebody promised them that online there will be some jobs ready and available for them somewhere in abroad. All of those things are dangerous for our countries, and this is a part of what Clarice you have clearly and very well put together, which is the battle of the mind. It needs to be won, and the way to winning it is what Julia said. Critical thinking needs to be taught. But critical thinking in the age of this AI, critical thinking in the in the times of this educational system that become more and more remote. How many do we have? How many times do we have access to books, and how many times do we have? We also see some in the national news, for instance, in Cote d'Ivoire, I have seen that people actually on national TV countering some misinformation that may have heard that are circulating everywhere. But beyond that, individuals, citizens, men and women needs to be taught how to effectively use their smartphones and all the social media that they have in their Clarice, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about this important topic. Warfare is not just about what weapons are shooting. Warfare is not just about occupation. Warfare can also be about occupying people's minds.
And of course, that we call weaponizing information. We round off with you, Yulia, still with the way forward and how we can control information, rhetoric or warfare that has actually engulfed the minds of the citizens and affecting even how states do act or relate towards each other.
Well, yes, quite a lot of religious texts and prophets were also highlighting the fact that the real battle and the battle, to call it that way, is the battle for humans' hearts and minds, and this is the key battlefield. Even now, the key battlefield for destructive and constructive forces, and whatever happens outside definitely has an enormous impact on each person being exposed to, observation of those processes. So, of course, while we cannot take under effective control the happenings that we observe at the global level, what can be taken under effective control is one's own mind and one's own way of thinking, way of interacting with the reality around and evaluating it, perceiving it. And of course, the let's say, responsibility for having own thoughts, activities, and words matching each other. So I think in such turbulent times, when it's really hard to predict and forecast the upcoming events, what is essential is to take care of what can be taken under control, which is, own mental and physical well-being, which implies not some kind of a selfish self-centering, but which implies a very healthy and balanced approach to own life and to the lives of people around that could be dependent on us, right? So that would be the key conclusion that I could possibly share for today's topic.
So much, dear Yulia, and just to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that from the viewpoints presented this day by our panel of experts, you will see the interconnectedness of the battle of the mind in geopolitics and why not diplomacy. And it shows that war is actually not just physical, but it's also very mental and can be very dangerous given the consequences of a mind that is not settled. And it is on this note to note that this is it sends a clarion call to both actors, the government, and even non-state actors like NGOs, the media, and even probably civil society and others to come together and, of course, to ensure that they work towards mitigating the global effect of the information or hybrid warfare that is even very visible in this world of polarity. And of course, I want to take this opportunity to thank the resource persons that we had this day, and also apologize for the inner conveniences that we had pertaining the internet connectivity with especially Dr. Andy Okwini, but of course the essentials were highlighted, and we're looking forward towards having such discussions to continue to edify, to educate the world, and bring about this trust in public policy, trust in government, and also trust even in the principle of international relations and globalization in today's world. And it is on this note that I will draw the curtains into our first edition of the program Global Insights for the year 2026. We are leaving you with a more calm mind that you'll be able to decipher what is wrong and, of course, what is right in order to push forward the necessary agenda that benefits particularly mankind. Thank you, and have a lovely moment in the company of programs on your Pan-African television. Bye-bye.